In this video, we'll examine the role of brands in society, which sets the stage for our discussion on brand responsibility in the coming weeks. People think of advertising and brand communications. Most people think of it working at the level of individual change. So, an advertising message or a social media post or a package, some information on a package, can change the way we feel about a brand, whether we like it more or dislike it more. It can change the level of knowledge we have about a brand. It can change our intentions to purchase or not purchase that brand. So it works on a level of individual change fairly well, as this has kind of been the role of advertising for most of its lifetime in society. There's actually more to advertising than working on the level of individual change. Advertising and brand messages can also work at the level of institutional change. An institution is an agent of order and purpose in a culture. So, advertising is an institution because there are set frameworks and parameters for how advertising works. The grocery industry is an institution because there's ways that grocery stores and the grocery industry work to make sure that we can achieve our goal of getting food. So advertising can also work to change institutions. So advertising messages can work to change what is expected and what is generally seen in the advertising institution, but it can also work to change other types of institutions. For example, advertising messages can encourage people to shop more sustainably at the grocery store. So that could change an institution. The third type of change that advertising and brand communication can affect is systemic change. The term systemic change means a change in a system, such as the educational system, the global food system, the political system. Systemic change means the entire system needs to be transformed. And the change in the system needs to be fundamental and affects how the whole system functions. Certainly, it's easier to get somebody to buy a bar of soap than to change an entire educational system, but advertising and brand communication can play a role in this important change. History gives us examples of individuals who use their power of their brands to affect systemic change. This is Josiah Wedgwood, who built a very successful factory making pottery and china in the UK in the early part of the 19th century. You may have heard of Wedgwood pottery and Wedgwood plates and dishes and things like that. But also, Josiah Wedgwood was an abolitionist, and he worked with other business owners to abolish slavery in the United Kingdom. And slavery was abolished in 1833, several decades before slavery was abolished in the United States. So, one individual, using the power of his brand and the leverage that his brand gave him, worked to affect change in a society. This is Henry Ford, who owned an automobile manufacturing company. You've probably heard of Ford. What Henry Ford did was support women's suffrage, and that is women's right to vote. And he supported it not only vocally, but he allowed women to meet in his home in order to organize and figure out how they were going to protest to get the right to vote. This is important because most places in society would not allow large groups of women to gather. But Henry Ford went ahead and allowed the women to gather, and women were given the right to vote in the United States. The 19th Amendment was ratified in 1920. Finally, this is Branch Rickey or Richer. I'm not sure how we pronounce his name. He was the general manager of the Brooklyn Dodgers, and he was the gentleman who signed Jackie Robinson to play for the Brooklyn Dodgers. Jackie Robinson was the first Black American to play in Major League Baseball, which until he was signed was a league only for white men. Before this, uh, Black men had to play in the Negro League. So Branch Rickey was the one who helped Jackie Robinson break the color line in Major League Baseball. Many consumers today like to think of themselves as being responsible, and so they will support brands that they see as responsible as well. 72% of people say brands should take a clear stand on social and political issues and make that stand very clear in their messaging. And 76% think companies should take an active role in influencing social and political issues. But many people today don't really understand what responsible means, and they can't even name a responsible brand. When they do, when they're asked to name a responsible brands, they name a brand that they currently like Facebook, Microsoft, and Amazon. And these brands were not originally built on a responsibility platform. And the problem is there's really not an agreed criteria for what it means to be responsible or what it means to be irresponsible. So consumers automatically revert to this idea of uh, well, I like this brand and I want this brand to be responsible because this brand will reflect who I am. This is something called Heider's balance theory, which we'll talk about in a little more detail in another video. We have 5 elements of brand responsibility, and we'll talk about each of these elements in their own video because they're so important. The first one is a responsible brand is authentic. A responsible brand is courageous. A responsible brand is empathetic. A responsible brand is resilient. And a responsible brand is committed to social good. So a brand can be authentic and be resilient, but it doesn't mean it's responsible. We believe there have to be all these 5 elements within a brand for a brand to be truly responsible. Brand responsibility isn't simply a list of actions or activities that a brand is involved with. It's not a list of what a brand is doing. What it is the intrinsic social proof of why the brand is doing what it's doing, how, it, how actions connect to the mission, how actions are courageous for that brand, how actions are going to affect social change. So, how the actions move beyond what we saw in the beginning as individual change into larger institutional and systemic changes. So that's what brand responsibility is to us. And as we move forward through the videos in this curriculum, we know that you're going to understand this in a much more deeper level. And we're excited to go on this journey with you.